you, that was beautiful. Good morning, everyone. Happy August. My name is Megan Lancaster, and today I will be your service coordinator. Today's reflection, the warming of air, will be shared by our minister, Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley. I welcome all of you today, and we, the congregation, welcome most particularly those of you who are visiting us. If you are new or visiting, consider signing the guest book at the back, which is also where you will find large print hymnals and hearing assistance devices if needed. So we have a fair number of announcements. First, coffee hour is changed/suspended from downstairs until the weather turns chilly. For now, we'll be doing lemonade and whatnot out on the porch as we did a while back. Also, a couple other things. Outside announcement, which you might have gotten an email about with links and stuff, so you could see details there, but the Windsor County Board of Realtors is having their second annual golf tournament and auction. So that is in September. There are links to sign up, links to the auction. All of that is in an email that was sent the other day. Also, blood drive is happening here on August 18th. If you have a place, you could put a poster. There are some posters in the back for you to take, put them in your community, and consider coming and giving blood yourself. Please take note for yourself of any events and activities that are in the back of your order of service. Also, a big thank you to Andean for our beautiful flowers. And lastly, Leon has an announcement to make himself.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. Just a brief announcement. One is kind of selfish. Last weekend, I was away at a family reunion, and I was around more Dunkleys than I have ever been around in my life. And it was awesome. It was really a great thing to do. I missed the memo, though, about dress in white for the final photo. So we'd have a photo with everybody dressed in white except me in a big black shirt. So easily identified. And then they shopped out the background and put it on the beach, which I thought was actually, I thought that's how people, anyway, it's a cool thing. I just wanted to share that. Also, I share that as just sort of saying that this is a community of care. So I'm going to send around 2 cards for 2 of us who are struggling a little bit. I'm going to send around a card for Donna and Ed, Donna Durgan and Ed, who suffered some serious flood problems and are struggling to recover that. And also one for Peggy Cannonseen, who's just pushing back against some serious physical challenge that she's been pushing back on for years. Hi. And so I'll send those cards around. Please sign them, whether or not you know them. It's a lovely thing to send around. A couple of months ago, I sent a card around for someone that I called John. It was for John Matthews, but I intentionally didn't say it, knowing that most people in the room might not know who he is. And I just said, please just send your good wishes. And when I gave those cards to him, he was holding them, and he started to read them while he was in his bed, and I said, "Oh, do you mind if I just take a picture of the outside and the inside before I go?" Because that's the last thing I did. And he said, "Oh, sure." And then I reached out for him to give me the cards, and he wasn't. He was like, "Sure." So it really does make a difference. Please send your good wishes to Donna and Ed and to Peggy. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, announcements. So also now, having done all of that, is the time, if you have not already, to turn off or put on silent whatever devices you might have that could beep, ring, make other weird noises or whatnot during our service. Thank you. All right, opening words. The Seasons of Life by Mary Frances Comer. We are grateful to mark time with seasons, to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, or to gather as family to remember our loved ones. In all these seasons, may we give thanks for the breath of life, ever mindful of the fragile nature of existence. May we live fully in each moment, from summer to fall and winter to spring. We gather in mystery and in the bonds of beloved community. May we radiate love both within and beyond these walls, this day and all the days to come, caring for those we have yet to meet and for those we love. Now is a time for meditation and silence and prayer. As we head into this time, consider planting your feet flat on the floor, putting your shoulders back, keeping your hands loose and open in your lap, and breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, breathing thoughtfully, remembering it is not we who breathe, but the spirit of life that breathes through us.
Good morning. It's good to see you. I was sharing with Bob and Catherine earlier that I was in Colorado one time years ago when I was driving across country, and I thought it was a good idea. It was in the Rockies at the time, and I thought it was a good idea to take the bike off the roof of my car and like tool around in the Rocky Mountains, just ride around. But they call the Rocky Mountains because they're mountains, and it's really hard to just kind of casually ride around. It was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, so the sun hadn't come up. And I'm like tooling around by the light of the moon or whatever ambient light is around, and I like couldn't make it up the first sort of mountain, but I got there, and then I went down, I came up again, and then I went down again. And the third time, the sun was starting to rise and the light was coming, and I was heading what way direction was I heading? Let me see where the sun was. I was heading west. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I was muscling the bike, you know what I mean? You're just forcing the bike, and I was afraid that I was gonna slip and scratch myself, get myself hurt, and then be lying there at 5:30 in the morning on the side of the road, unable to move. So I walked the bike up to the highest part of the hill, at the top of the mountain. And just as the peak was about here, I couldn't see over it yet. There was nothing but sky and a road. And I was about 15 feet away from the peak, and a golden eagle came right over the top of the mountain as if to scratch its belly on the road. Like, it's just like so close. It was like closer than that fan. It was like right there, And I just was like, whoa, and the golden eagle like fixed its eyes really hard on me, and I felt terrified. And then it descended into the valley below me. And I turned around to watch it, and I saw the back of a golden eagle in flight. And I I was like, ever since then, raptors, big birds, have amazed me, especially the ones that fly in circles. Do you know why they do that? Catch the draft. So they have really sharp eyes. Raptors have really sharp eyes. Many times sharper than our own. And they can see the distortions, the temperature distortions in the atmosphere. And the ones that look like they're rising, they fly into and circle. And it's like this little elevator, right? They don't have to flap their way up there. They just ride the warming of the air. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, August the 6th, and the title of this morning's reflection is The Warming of the Air. To all souls I say, welcome, and it's good to be together. There was a man-made pond on this beautiful farm where I used to live in North Carolina. And around the pond, they were building up a new fence, or they were taking down an old fence. I couldn't really tell from where I was. It's hard to say. It was hard to tell from where I was at my house. I was pretty far away. All I could see was a line of fence posts, a line of fence posts that were standing around a portion of the man-made pond, suggesting the coming or the going of a line of separation that really wasn't there anyway. Whether they were building up the new fence or taking down the old one, I do not know. Sometimes separation is just an illusion. It was a moment of real-life philosophy for me, one that the big dogs like to talk about. Alan Watts is a big dog. He's one of my favorite philosophers. He once said this: one has to get used to the idea, get used to the notion that different things can be inseparable. That which is explicitly two can also be implicitly one. If we forget that, very funny things happen. I was living in that experience. At first it felt like confusion, like ambiguity, and after a while those feelings melted. They softened into something that felt more like faith, a real life experience that opened the door to something deeper. Now, you could see the fence posts from my house, even though the man-made pond was pretty far away, maybe a couple hundred yards or so, which is a pretty long ways, actually, and down the hill and down the dirt gravel driveway that wound its way to the east and to the south of where I was. It was a magical place, this farm. The land felt like a poem to me, much like this land does. It felt like church to be there. It felt like sanctuary. It felt to me like new and familiar medicine was under my tongue, new and familiar, reminding me of something ancient that I had lost and was finding again. Now, this is a sanctuary that we're sitting in here, this house of stone and wood, but this is a sanctuary too, this house of blood and bone. There are obvious distinctions. Differences are unmistakably clear, which tends to make the sameness hard to see. The more than obvious differences between these two sanctuaries, the sanctuary of stone and wood and the sanctuary of blood and bone, those obvious differences make the less than obvious differences harder to see and harder to understand. And yet the hard to see sameness brings such beauty into the world. And we get to walk through and walk into this beauty with one another. We all get to be this beauty. How do we do this? How will we together walk out and into the beauty of the world? How are we inseparable from that beauty? No fences. When I think of those who came before, the many thousands gone, quote, James Baldwin begins a speech like that, and Cornel West does too. They are part of the same tradition, and so are you, and so am I. a tradition that keeps its marks upon our heart. What was Russell's last name, Joanne? Morgan. Russell Morgan, holding him. Kristen Rose sat right next to where you are. She sat in the front part of the sanctuary on the sunrise side. This is the sunset side. She sat in the front part of this sanctuary too. This sanctuary at the center of my chest. Kristen is a tender soul who I did not know for very long, but in whom my own soul could recognize a completion. She sat in the spiritual house that some people call Kafutanyama. Kafutanyama is a beautiful word. Can you say it? Kafutanyama. Kafutanyama. Yeah. It's an African word. It's a West African word. It's spoken by people known as the Wodabe, a nomadic people living in the West African Sahel, in the arid part of the world, the transitional part between the rainier lands and the Sahara Desert. They are nomadic, which means that they do not settle down. They are forever on the move, and let me tell you, it would change the shape of my library if I were one of them. They seem to have a wonderful community, what little I know of them. They seem to love on each other deeply and well, across the illusion of separateness. In fact, there's a tradition in that culture, the way they do things over there, a tradition that carries a beautiful name, Kafutanyama. Kafutanyama is the beautiful practice. You see, when a member of the nomadic community leaves the community, their departure is marked by ritual. A circle is made, a circle being the symbol of the inclusive community. Goodbyes are shared and tears are shed if they are anything like me. And then the departing person leaves that circle of love. They walk right out. And the sandy earth is gathered from their last footsteps within community and is placed inside a talisman, inside a little leather amulet that is to be worn around the neck, tied at the proper length so that it hangs above the solar plexus, in the center of the chest, right above the sanctuary of blood and bone. We could all have one of these, and in this way, their last impressions on the earth would be forever on our hearts. It's very cool. What is our spiritual practice of saying goodbye to those that we love? We do this in lots of different ways, but we don't make talismans or amulets generally. In fact, sometimes we don't even know how to share our grief. I mean, it's appropriate to cry, right? For some of us. But there's a trip about crying for men, for boys. From an early age, boys are socialized against such a behavior. Boys don't cry. We learn, we hear at an early age when we're so young, and it never really goes away. I'm older than 7 years old right now, and I still hear it in my head. Of course, it's not like men don't grieve and don't cry. Many cry in different ways, and it's not like women are experts by birth at crying. It's not like transgender people, those of us who transition, escape the conundrum. I'm not a social critic, and I don't want to be an anthropologist about this issue. I just want to make space for however we need to grieve, for whatever our soul needs to do, and for wherever it needs to journey when our hearts break, when someone goes away. So I want to tell you a story right now. It's a story about my life, but before I do, I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not sharing a random story as if for the purposes of being known or making friends. I love you all, but that's not why I'm here. That's not what the free pulpit is for, why it was created, and I have the highest respect for the free pulpit. I want to share a story about my life in order to accomplish what theological lecturing does so well. I'm a discursive academic at heart. I want to reveal the context of God talk and theology. I love doing that so much, but it utterly bores most rational human beings. My colleagues love it too. Seminary was great for us in this way. We could geek out all the time, often into the wee hours of the night. Our professors were so proud of us and so relieved that we were as passionate as we were and still are. So here's my story. When we lose someone to death or in conflict that cannot be reconciled, there's a certain emptiness that we suffer. I share this because it's so very important to remain part of a community and part of a family. So look around just for a moment and look around to see who's not here right now and call them in your hearts into community. Just remember them in your heart, in the love that you have for the world. Now, my friend Carlton Pearson, like I said, I just came back from a family reunion. My friend Carlton Pearson would often say, I don't want to be a part of a good family. He said, being part of a family is hard enough. Just having returned from the family reunion last weekend in Florida, I appreciate these words very much. Reverend Carlton Pearson out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, he was so great at glorifying the average and the mundane, great at reminding us of the sacred that lives in all things. God is working in all things, if you can accept that language. Now, I do accept that language, even though I'm shy about saying so. I'm shy because I don't really believe in God in the ways that I've been told by others. I do believe in God in the ways in which I've been taught by life. So when I share a story, most of the time I'm just sharing it because life has taught me something about the holy. Life has not taught me how it is, by any means, although many may identify with the stories that I share. Life has taught me only of my own experience. The community part, the truly holy part, is up to us. So sometimes I don't even know why I'm sharing a story until Spirit shows me. I get these little feelings, and sometimes they're really unwise. So I have to be careful sometimes. But I hear a still small voice within myself, and then I follow as best as I can. Sometimes the journey only lasts a few seconds, as if like riding a wave at the beach that one decides to surf a few seconds too late. Sometimes we miss the wave. Sometimes missing the wave is the thing that brings you to the holy place. It's mysterious, man. And as soon as you think you have a handle on something, something happens that humbles me, and something happens that brings me to my knees. And I was brought to my knees in Durham, North Carolina, in the last of my 6 years at Duke. I had moved to a place called Rougemont, Red Mountain, that's a lot like and nothing like Vermont, Green Mountain, another color mountain range place. The town of Rougemont was about 8 miles north of Durham, up a dotted yellow line road that cuts through the woods and tapers off sharply on either side at an angle of about 30 degrees or more. No shoulder to speak of. I was headed north and headed south into the city of Durham one day. There was nobody else on the road, and I came upon a turkey vulture lying in the middle of the southbound lane. It was getting dark. It was almost nightfall. Swerving, even at medium speeds, was increasingly dangerous. So without really thinking about it, I pulled my car into a nearby driveway and I grabbed a large canvas duffel bag out of the back seat, and I used it to pick up the bird and placed the canvas bag and the bird in the trunk, and then I continued on into town. I was happy knowing that I might have prevented an accident. Now, have you ever seen a turkey vulture up close? Yeah. So they're huge. They're huge. I put the bird and the bag in the trunk of my car, and I got back up on the road. I ran my errands, and then I headed home to start making plans to bury the vulture. I started thinking about creating a ritual of release, and I didn't get very far. So in the morning, I sat outside and started reading from 2 very different books. I read from a book called The City of God, which was written in 426 by St. Augustine of Hippo, which is located on the Mediterranean in what is now Algeria. And I read from a book called Animal Speak, which was written in 1993 by Ted Andrews of Ohio, which is located between the cities of Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. According to a source that I found online, the city of God, as large as it is, breaks down into 3 major themes. 1, the refutation of the idea that Christians are responsible for Rome's 5th century problems. Two, that should probably be 4th century problem. Anyway, two, the concept that the internal peace could be found right here on earth. And 3, the argument that makes it clear that hell is real. That's what Augustine did. Augustine begins by stating the purpose and the argument of his book. He writes, "Here is the fulfillment of my promise, a book which I have taken upon myself, the task of defending the glorious city of God against those who prefer who prefer their own gods to the founder of that city." Rome had been sacked by Visigoths 16 years earlier, 16 years before he published this book. The citizens of Rome were still shocked and still devastated, blaming themselves for having turned away from the pagan gods that protected their city, and blaming themselves for having turned toward the God of nascent Christianity. St. Augustine was trying to disabuse them of that notion, arguing to the contrary that Christians were responsible for much of Rome's successes. City of God is a long haul. The version I was reading was more than 1,000 pages. It's a tough read. Tough read certainly for me until I adjusted to its language, which was taking me a while. In fact, it didn't happen nearly quickly enough. So weary of working so hard and daunted by the long journey in front of me, I turned to the other book, which I found much more accessible, the Ted Andrews book called Animal Speak, The Spiritual and Magical Powers of Creatures Great and Small. Ted Andrews begins his book by stating its purpose and argument. There was a time when humanity recognized itself as part of nature, and nature as part of itself. Dreaming and waking were inseparable. They were inseparable realities. The natural and the supernatural world merged and blended. People used images of nature to express this unity, to install the transpersonal kind of experience. As a budding student of theology, I found myself drawn to Augustine. But as a man with a canvas-wrapped vulture in the trunk of his car, I also found myself drawn to Ted Andrews. I read the section about raptors, about turkey vultures ostensibly, and I was so glad that I did. Andrews writes, "In earliest times, the sun lived very close to the earth. So close, in fact, that the sun became unbearable. The animal world got together and they decided to do something about it. They wanted to move the sun farther away. So the fox was the first to volunteer. He grabbed the sun in his mouth and he began running into the heavens. And after a short while, the sun became too hot, burning the fox's mouth, and so he stopped. And to this day, the inside of a fox's mouth is black. And then the opossum volunteered. He wrapped his tail around the sun and began running toward the heavens. But before long, the sun became too hot, burning his tail, and he had to stop. To this day, the opossum has no hair on its tail. It was then that the vulture stepped forward. The vulture was the most beautiful and most powerful of birds. Upon its head was a beautiful mantle of rich feathering that all the birds envied. Knowing that the earth would burn up unless someone moved the sun, the vulture placed its head against it and began to fly to the heavens. With powerful strokes of its wings, it pushed and pushed the sun farther and farther up into the heavens. Though it could feel its feathers burning, the vulture continued until the sun was at a safe distance in the sky away from the earth. Unfortunately, the vulture lost its magnificent head of feathers for eternity." End quote. Following this, Ted Andrews tracks the vulture through various mythological traditions. In the Greek tradition, the vulture was a symbol of heaven and spirit, and heaven and earth, spirit and matter, good and evil, and the guardian and an avenger. And in Egypt, the vulture was the goddess of truth, usually depicted as carrying. In Egypt, the goddess of truth is usually depicted as carrying a vulture's feather. And to the Pueblo Indians, the vulture was a symbol of purification. Its medicine would restore harmony that had been broken. So these words helped me to think about an end-of-life ritual for the vulture, the great bird that I hardly knew, and in whom my soul had found completion. I was planning that ritual, and then tragically, But not shockingly, my friend's beautiful dog died. And it shattered me. Loppy was her name. I had adopted her towards the end of her life. She and my own dog got along famously, even though Loppy was much older. My dog, Samori, my yellow lab, was filled with life, energy, and very strong and very powerful. She was always challenging Loppy into tugs of war and other games. Loppy almost was always disinterested. Samori persisted, and sometimes Loppy would engage. She wouldn't tug like Samori wanted her to tug, but she'd bite down on the rope or on the chew toy or on the stick or whatever it was, and then she would softly but persuasively snarl until Samori admitted defeat. She was a character, and she died in my arms on the evening of May 19th of 2005. And I cried all night, and I wrote this poem in the morning. I was called to write this poem, truly driven to write it, because in that next morning, at 5:15 a.m., on each fence post around the man-made pond that was down the hill from me was perched a vulture, just as beautiful as can be. The poem is called Dear Loppy, or The Warming of the Air. The pond in New North Country is misty orange at the sunrise, and children dip their feet soles first for good continued health. They sat today for hours until the night air grew much warmer, and a flight of geese returned with their great sonic sense of wealth, landing in a V formation, squawking richly, just like geese. The geese returned, but the raptors are gone now. They come and go in shifts. The geese are cool and everything, but the raptors know the warming of the air. Raptors are the teachers of the deeper things than fire, things I need to bend my mind to know. Speaking in a gentleness unmade by strong desire, yes, the grass is always greener, but it's just as hard to mow. They rise above the things that matter not at all, and I see you up there, beloved, holding up the sky. You, like them, follow the slow curve of morning on clear, brave days like these, when the sun, out of silver pocket, rakes a comfortable burn across the waking of the world. Graceful plumes of smoke, lighter than air, and to my eye invisible, drafting up like cool steam from this child-dipped splash of water, rising to catch her under wing, to softly and to gently press her to greater height. And so to us it seems quite effortless. Raptors just seem to soar as if it is their nature, but for them there is some degree of work. They are well suited for it, maybe, for great wings are built for great height and for the cover of some distance and for the sheltering of the sky. Now I've heard that ancient stories from that station high above have long brought comfort to the Pueblo and the Greek and the Egyptian, who craned their neck over horizons before losing lines of sight. Now I don't know about that, but craning ours, I know that we will miss the steady counsel, the shelter, and the comfort of her light. Raptors just seem to soar, but for them there is some degree of work, well-suited and keen-eyed, with vision 8 times sharper than my own, they say. What is it to be able to see the very risings of the warming of the air that wind like upside-down tornadoes to the sky? Kansas upside-down tornadoes. And to place yourself accordingly for the bird's eye view, an excellence of real estate just floating where few dare, singing location, location, like somewhere over the rainbow. Now, I cannot see the wind in the ways that she can. Just its impact on the trees and leaves of grass. Just the fletch across this tiny bit of sea or across the pond in New North Country, so misty orange at the sunrise, where children dip their feet soles first for good continued health. Every blessing, my beloved, every blessing. There are sanctuaries of stone and wood, and there are those of blood and bone. Of course, there are obvious distinctions, but they are also one and the same. Both bring so much beauty into the world, and we get to walk into it. We get to walk through it. We get to be it, actually. And how will we do this? How will we together walk out into the beauty of the world? Will we gather the soul fire in our mouths and burn our tongues black in the process like the fox did? Will we wrap our tails around it like the possum and singe ourselves? Will we burn our crown of feathers trying to lift the sun in order to keep one another safe? Will we allow the warming of the air to help us find our wisdom? In these brave August days of summer, fullness, and abundance, when the gardens are heavy both with weeds and with delicious vegetables, when the world seems like a poem, and when the weather is just right, may it be not just the air that warms around us, apart and separate. May it also be our very good and tender souls. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.